as a current events pod. Now, all we talk about is current events.
But there haven't been any.
Macron's got coronavirus.
Is that true?
Last week, if you're listening to this when it comes out.
Okay.
And he could be dead by now. I don't know, because I don't follow current events.
Only the latest in who has
Coronavirus.
got
Yeah.
coronavirus.
Donald Trump got it,
So
guys.
Did anybody hear about that?
Anybody hear about this? Boy, this Trump guy. Is he going to get elected? What's going on with him? Here we are, Dan. Not only is it our holiday episode coming out possibly on Christmas. Is Christmas?
It's Christmas Day.
Is it Christmas Day on Friday, or is
I
it?
think it is, yeah. I did check.
We did it. We made it to Christmas. Happy Christmas, as they say here.
Happy Christmas, everybody.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And everything else. And it's also, much more importantly, our 10th episode. Technically our 11th, but we don't count the intro, so it's our 10th episode. We made it. We did it. We got this far. And wow, do we have a blowout episode for you today. We got all the guests. Noam Chomsky is going to be coming on later. Who's the other? Kissinger is going to be coming on later. All the people on Death Watch. Giuliani.
COVID Death Watch.
COVID Death Watch. And yeah, 10th episode. Dan, we did it. Here we are. How do you feel?
Ecstatic.
Ecstatic. Mission accomplished, baby.
No, it's nice. It's nice. It felt. It's felt quite easy.
Yeah, it has. Easier than I think we thought.
Know. I mean,
which is worrying.
I mean, I suppose maybe the ease that I feel, the ease with which I feel we have produced these 10 podcasts,
yeah,
might be reflected in the substandard quality of the podcast.
Yeah, true. Having said that, quantity over quality.
Yeah,
that's what I always say.
Yeah.
I'd rather 10 shitty episodes. No, these have all been so good.
One polished.
Yeah, as opposed to one really good one. When did we start? Started in October, I think. September? No, not September. Or November? So we just do the math.
We. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't actually remember either.
There was a there was a day, dear listener, when I woke up to a WhatsApp message from Jack.
Yes.
Which said something like, "I'm this far from doing a podcast." He didn't specify how far this far was.
Yeah. I also don't know what
I interpreted that to mean pretty damn close.
I don't know what initiated me to send you that text.
Yeah.
No idea.
I was pleased to receive it.
Yeah.
It was a possibility I'd been milling over in my head for quite a long time.
Yeah.
But I'm not an action person. I'm a milling things over in your head person.
Yeah, I'm the exact opposite.
It was good that you sort of like push the domino run.
Push the domino. We did it. It's funny because I feel like ever since we met, this is just kind of this stupid shit we talk about. And so now it's just kind of like, now we're just recording it.
Yeah. And making a little bit of an effort to.
Yeah.
A little bit of an effort.
A little bit of an effort. Because I feel, okay, so that's one of the things I figured we could talk about in this. First of all, welcome. This is Auxiliary Statements. I'm Jack.
I'm Dan. Welcome.
I figured, okay, so this is going to be...
Our general work ethic.
Yeah, exactly. This is going to be a bit of, how you say, clip show. We're phoning it in for this, our 10th episode. And we're going to kind of do a little retrospective of a bunch of things, everything that we've read. So there's nothing new that we've read this week, but I figured kind of before we did that, we could kind of talk about, have we figured out what we're doing with this show yet? Why we're doing it? Because ostensibly we explained that in the intro episode.
Yeah. I think there are. It's worth looking back. I can't. If I'd have prepared, I'd have maybe listened to that, or at least thought to write down what it was that I ostensibly thought I had said in that first episode as a rationale for making a podcast.
Don't go back and listen to that one. Just start here.
Yeah.
Or if you want some history.
Yeah. It's funny. I was really opposed to putting that first episode out. And Jack was just like, "Yeah, it'll be fine." Now that it's all going out, I'm sort of like, it's history.
Yeah.
It's just sort of disappearing into the wake.
Yeah, because we've discussed the possibility.
I'm not keen on like rewriting.
Yeah, we've discussed the possibility of redoing that episode, but perhaps now the history should be left as it is.
Yeah. That's my sense. That's my sentiment.
Yeah.
We'll be pleased. I mean, if we carry on doing this for any length of time, I think it will be quite. I mean, we would have always had the recording anyway, but like,
Yeah.
it'd be quite nice to be able to go back and like,
Yeah.
look at that genuine first episode.
Yeah.
Um,
We could do commentary, play by play. Oh, here now I say
could
something
play
that's
it and then
really
talk
wrong.
over it.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I guess I'll use this word again, but ostensibly we said that we were gonna do this episode, call it auxiliary statement, or do this show, call it auxiliary statements, to kind of like take a look at some of the theories and the dogma of ostensibly Marxism, to ostensibly look at what other kind of like addendums we could ostensibly make to those ostensible theories. And it's interesting because I feel like, yeah, we are definitely trying to not just read the basic, well, not basic, but the like, read this if you want to be a Marxist, as we said in our Althusser episode. But it's interesting because I feel like this show has definitely become a lot of like, which I really enjoy, like an excuse to just research stuff, an excuse to read, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I one of my main motivations was just that like to have some kind of project to hang
Exactly.
some of my own research around, because I kind of read things a little bit.
Yeah.
And sort of thought, oh, that's sometimes occasionally I would come across something. Oh, that's really interesting. I'm really thrilled by this. Sort of think about pursuing it somehow, some way, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I have no way to actually turn it into a research project of any sort.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we're necessarily doing research at the moment.
You know what
But
it
we
is?
are. I think there is I'm enjoying the sort of educational element for ourselves, kind of thing.
Totally.
And I've sort of decided that we should just let our curiosity be the guide.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, there is no other way. I mean, there are other ways, I suppose. There are
Yeah.
either deciding what people might actually want to listen to.
Ah.
I suppose there's also deciding what people ought to know.
Yeah.
But I'm
That's a really good
I'm more
point.
comfortable with, I suppose. I mean, I'm more comfortable with finding what it is that we're interested in.
Absolutely.
And I don't know.
It's less
if people want to
gatekeeping.
listen, they can listen.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Because, yeah, I always was kind of put off by the, like... Because, I don't know, like, I feel like I know the kind of, like, sect of leftists, potential, like, online leftists that I'd like to be a part of in terms of, like, my theory and the way that I think. But I think that you're right. It is kind of, if I can tie your thought in, it is kind of almost dangerous to kind of just read those things that think that those people read that I want to be a part of. You know what I mean? Because I feel like, if you don't let curiosity be a guide, you're going to like miss out on some of the things that you wouldn't have read otherwise, obviously. But it's also just like I said, it's so gatekeepy. It's so like the way that so much theory is talked about on the left is talked about in terms of like, oh, you've read Robert Brenner. Oh, I read Ellen Meason's Wood. You know, do you read Robert Brenner? Blah 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 blah. But it's like, well, yeah, God, you're just not getting everything that you could be, because now that it's just so tied down to like, I don't know what it means to be a real leftist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's dangerous.
I mean, we could come on in a minute to like. We should have a bit of a conversation. It would be good to do it now on air, I suppose. About our we've had this joking attitude that's come up a few times on air, I suppose, on the podcast. But other times, equally jokingly, between the two of us, of just like not going to read Lenin or not going to read like. And in some respects, it is only a joke, in that like I am quite interested in those texts and that history kind of thing.
Sure.
And at some point, maybe we'll get to it. Right, there are aspects of like. Sort of communist history, history of the Soviet Union. There's sort of like various big revolutions that we all sort of hang out. We quite easily hang out sort of fixation and sort of like fidelity on. But also there is this kind of like I'm keen to. I feel like by jumping into those kind of texts, it's just quite alienating.
Sure.
Even if not in a gatekeepy way, or just in a simple like. Oh God! Some more people like talking about
exactly.
Lenin.
Yeah.
Like you just like, I would like to. I mean, there is a broader conversation that we've been having, and we will hopefully have at some point about also how we feel about terminology like communist and socialist.
Yeah.
What it means.
Yeah.
Both in terms of like actual reality and also sort of like social understand, like what people actually understand those things to mean, what we understand those things to mean, what historic agents have understood those things to mean.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a much bigger thing that we can't really delve into super deeply now, although obviously we have all the time in the world, so we could do it. But I was quite keen to like take those words and just attach them to other things, or like try and make them feel at least a little bit like an open system, like certain elements you can take or leave. You don't have to adopt everything as in its totality, kind of thing. I mean, I don't know whether we've been succeeding like that, but that's kind of my aspiration when I sort of step back and think about like a philosophy, what maybe one sort of philosophy that I'm trying to apply, kind of thing.
The philosophy of the pod.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also, like, I have a secret thing which I'm trying to achieve, which is like almost quite antithetical to that, which is I would quite like to learn to come across as an orthodox Marxist of some sort or other.
Yeah, one of these days we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
In the sense that, like, I'd like to pass in sort of like
those circles.
In those circles, yeah. So maybe that's not necessarily something that, like, I mean, that can be a motivation for my of my own kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how much like sort of like spills into the podcast, but it's almost slightly antithetical to this idea of like broadening out this terminology.
Well, we did talk about.
I also do have an attachment to like the sort of like the big M sort of Marxism.
Yeah. Big M.
What that means and what that's historically meant, kind of thing, as opposed to like a small M, just something.
I'm a small M. That's the thing. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I would just like to get to the point where I can call myself a Marxist without just being like, that guy has no fucking idea what he's talking about. Because at this point, I really don't, quite frankly.
Yeah. I mean, long time podcaster and like, I don't know what his official title is, but it was like freelance publisher at Zero Bucks. Douglas Lane always calls himself a wannabe Marxist, and he's been in the podcast game for a decade now, sort of interviewing all these people and like reading Capital extensively and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I feel like it's probably one of those things. It's quite a good way to look at it. Like you just like, there's always a sort of like striving after something that's not quite there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And better that than thinking you have it all down, kind of thing. I mean, that's the road to
madness.
Yeah. But also like intellectual stagnation.
Totally.
And sort of like social historical irrelevance, is to say like everything that was of significance was written in the 18th century. All of the historical events of consequence happened prior to like 1920.
Yeah, exactly. It happened from 1789 to 1918. Yeah. That's it. We don't care anything else after that.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know whether we are the most equipped people
or
in the world to be embarking on a project of like trying to connect a kind of like socialist Marxist past with a sort of like emancipatory future of some sort, kind of thing. But it doesn't just have to be us.
Yeah, please help.
And that, I think, that's to some extent the effort that I think needs to be made in general, and that I'd quite like to think of us, at least as we go forward, working out how to contribute to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we did. I keep in mind when we say Orthodox Marxists, we are also have been discussing reading Murray Bookchin. So we're going everywhere, baby. We're going everywhere. Next, we'll be reading Alan Greenspan and all the other Chicago boys.
Yeah, well, I initially I wasn't quite sure how we'd pitch the show and in what way. Like in the first episode, I just came out with sort of Marxist communist.
Yeah.
And then now I sometimes say socialist rather than Marxist communist. Yeah. But I do feel like we've stuck relatively close to a particular canon and tradition.
Yeah.
And whether there are more interesting things to look at. Whether it's a matter of looking at other political traditions like anarchism, or whether it's a matter of looking at other academic fields and then sort of feeding that knowledge back in, kind of thing.
Yeah.
There are certain sort of like academic fields that I'd like to do some reading around. I'd like to read some anthropology.
Yeah.
I'd like to learn more about like I mean, maybe there's some like evolutionary biology that would be quite interesting. Yeah, so there are other fields which we might be able to draw from, and then put a sort of like political veneer over the top of. To some
Yeah,
extent.
totally.
Moving forward as well, that's also something
Yeah.
I quite like to
Yeah,
think about.
Dan and I ran into each other at a local grocery store last night. Dan caught me in the act of just staring at the donuts. And
Yeah, you look like you had a single-minded focus that you had to get to the shop,
I did.
knowing that you wanted some kind of treat.
I did. That was all. It was
and
after
then you
dinner.
then you were stuck in the sort of bind of
Yeah.
what is it that I actually want?
What is it that I actually want?
The real question: what
It was
what
more
does
so,
Jack want?
what can I get to not be disgusted with myself? And then I saw you, and I was like, I can't get donuts. It's like it's just too embarrassing. The one thing I'm getting. So I got
You should
cookies.
have bought donuts.
I should
You
have.
should have bought donuts.
Nice. It was tonight. So yeah, clip show. Here we are. Look at
Yeah,
us.
yeah,
We're doing
yeah.
it. But before we kind of move on, we were definitely talking about in the coming few episodes or just in the future, getting into some ecology would be great. Like you mentioned, anthropology,
Sure, yeah.
evolutionary biology, philosophy of science. We'll possibly do next
Next
episode
week,
actually
a little bit of that.
to explain the title a little bit more
Yeah.
of the show. And yeah, it could be very good. Do some expanding our horizons.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
We'll find out. Tune in next week.
I mean, yeah, it's a voyage of discovery for us.
yeah, exactly.
There
yeah.
is no big plan. I'd like to have like a 5-episode plan or something, but we'll see. We'll see.
yeah. We'll see. Oh, well, we could do that, but then the authors we want to read will get canceled. Then we can't read them. God, it's cancel culture. Run amok. Speaking of cancel culture, let's go through our episodes and see which ones we can cancel. So we started it off episodes. We'll do this kind of chronologically. Episodes, the intro, episode 1, and episode 6 were all on our good friend Ralph Miliband. And so, yeah, obviously that's a book that we read a lot from these past 10 episodes, and we'll be reading more from in the future to eventually finish it whenever that happens. Eventually finish that short introductory book on Marxism. A lot to talk about though. Obviously we've been getting a lot from that book, Marxism and Politics. And yes, definitely one of the things that we've read that you can pull the most from. As I've said in a previous episode, I think if you're new to Marxism, new to leftism, or anything like that, and you're kind of like, this Marx guy, what was he talking about? This could be the primer to pick up as your first reading, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's certainly true.
Yeah.
It's
clear.
And Miliband, I mean, I've said this before, but obviously we're going to recap ourselves to some extent. Miliband's somebody who sits quite outside of the big N Marxist tradition to some extent.
Yeah.
So I think he managed to bring his own perspective, seemingly from my limited experience so far, sort of like. He has a unique outlook and experience, and also very erudite and
easy to
clearly
read.
written.
Yeah.
What is most appealing to that book, and what I think we took most from it, was just how detailed a perspective to aim for or to try and take, kind of thing. One of the things that was really helping with, and it kind of connects to aspects of what I imagine to be the mission statement, what at least one aspect of the mission statement of this podcast, is to sort of like take bigger concepts and try and actually work out what they mean in a more sort of fine detailed way, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, the class episode is a good example where it's like one is confronted with a lot of sort of rhetoric around class. Obviously, it's central to Marxist and communist politics, and socialist politics as well.
Cool.
But you're quite usually confronted with like some big terms and sort of some grand theoretical narrative.
Yeah.
Quite often, what feels quite a lot like an ahistorical narrative, and language like bourgeoisie and proletariat can be very alienated, both to sort of like a totally lay and uneducated listener, or even to people who are sort of familiar with that terminology but don't really know what it is that the person who they're talking to actually means by those terms. And it seems to imply a lot of like both historical theories and political tactics that you don't necessarily know, whether you agree with or whether you understand them fully. That's certainly been my experience sometimes when I meet people on the left who sort of like have this sort of rhetoric that they deploy, and I'm both sort of alienated by it and then also kind of like confused and maybe even belittled by it, in the sense that I'm like, oh, what do I measure up to this person's sort of theoretical heft, or are they just like conning me with sort of empty terminology and phrases and
like
things.
I'm trying to do.
So yeah, quite. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we're in the same con game with anybody else. Yeah. No, please do not think us erudite educators of any sort. But obviously the first episode that we did on class, and the rest of that book also, the class one in particular, like really breaks down those pieces of terminology,
absolutely,
puts them in both historical and sociological context, like encourages the kind of analysis of terminology and the real world which is going to be necessary if one wants to actually take theory and apply it to a contemporary setting, rather than just like trot out some theoretical terms and then go home thinking that you've actually made a significant impact. Not that we claim to be making any significant political impact, either in the real world or in the minds of ourselves or the listeners.
But it also, I think especially that I would call it the first chapter. Technically it is the first chapter, but it's also not the first chapter. It's second. Class and conflict really does break down a lot of those terms, and it does just kind of get you to think, like, if you're really going to take seriously the idea of trying to understand political theory, of economics, of sociology, and you're really going to try and understand the way the world works and not just be like some pompous jerk Marxist, you do need to engage with critical thinking quite a bit. Because if you just read the Communist Manifesto and you go, to like your next DSA meeting and you're like, oh, well, the two hostile classes directly opposed to each other, like, you're going to come across as a dick, and you're also wrong, more importantly. And I think that's what this chapter and the whole of the book does really well, which is break down these ideas, whether it's class conflict, superstructure as well. He doesn't go kind of as hard against the idea of base and superstructure as like Ellen Meekson's would, I think, where she would just toss the whole thing out. But he's quite
critical in the introduction to that book. He's quite critical in the sense that
he doesn't want to be an economic determinist, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, well, that book is all about, really, that book, Marxism and Politics, is all about trying to work out what a Marxist politics is.
Yeah.
And in the introduction, he makes the case that Marxism really has never had political theory. It's not actually got any political theories, kind of thing. Argues against like theories of base and superstructure in a similar way, I think, to which Ellen Meekson's would, or one aspect of her criticism he shares, is that it divorces like political thinking and makes everybody focus purely on economics, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he ties it into a desire from sort of like Stalinist politics and the Soviet Union, really, to sort of like distract from everything other than the Soviet Union and its efforts to industrialize, and sort of like the ideology of Stalinism being one that attaches a huge amount of significance and makes its sole goal only sort of economic development. And that has meant that Marxism surrendered or never even had any desire to actually like develop a political theory of its own, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, he does the same thing with kind of the Althusserian, at least, kind of like if you just read the ISA, RSA stuff, theory of the state, kind of like why Marxists tend to call the state just an instrument of class oppression, just run by one class at the expense of the other class. Which is all really good because he doesn't throw any of these ideas out. He just kind of like explains why you might hear some like college Marxists say these things, right? And it gives you the tools, I think, to think critically. So Yeah. All in all,
Yeah,
very good.
When that book combined with the Ellen Mixon's Wood readings that we've
Yeah.
done, has sort of set us on a sort of trajectory, which is very much more historical, or sort of like focused on history and its narrative kind of thing, rather than
Putting the theory first, I suppose.
yeah. Or rather than any type of determinism, certainly.
Certainly, yeah.
And also seemingly sets itself opposed to various types of structuralism as well. I wonder whether that's a. I mean, I have been quite attracted to and convinced by those aspects of those several readings. It was nice to have those two play into one another in certain ways, or sort of like that, in the sense that like we've been learning a theory or educating ourselves, and also to the sense that there's sort of being a sort of meta structure to the first 10 episodes,
which was intended.
That's sort of entirely intentional. Sort of something that has sort of like revealed itself to us, or sort of like I think going forward we need to do some more reading around that, decide how we hold, whether we hold with that or not. But it's been nice to sort of like attach ourselves to some certain strands that have been running through. I think going forward, I mean, certainly in last week's episode, we were having a little bit of difficulty between the idea of sort of economic determinism as opposed to I don't know, like I suppose the opposite to economic determinism would be class conflict, resulting in changes in social relations, rather than changes in technology automatically sort of like fostering
changes in our
social
wet
relations kind of thing. Changes in our
to bring that back.
But I think we certainly have a lot more work to do in passing that distinction to some extent.
Yeah, sure.
I think we owe very certain types of technological determinism, I suppose, a closer reading and a sort of like kind of, I don't know, I suppose.
Yeah, I definitely have more of a critical eye for anything that even smacks a little bit of technological determinism these days. Like, get it out of here. All in all, 10 out of 10.
Nice.
I would say so far. We haven't finished the book. We haven't finished Marxism and Politics yet.
Okay. I thought you were grading our podcast.
You're kidding it. So far, our podcast, 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10, let's be honest. This book, 10 out of 10. Let's rate them. Let's rate them as we go.
Oh, I see. 10. Okay. Damn it, you should have told me we were going to do this. Okay, 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
I only hesitate because I want to give Ellen Mixon's Wood even more.
Yeah, I know, same. I know. So there's the name, Ellen Mixon's Wood. That was episodes... Oh, no! Oh, my God, I'm putting the cart before the horse. I get these all wrong. Put her to the side for now. Episode 2, the Tribune interviews that we looked at. So that was... We looked at Tribune's, I think it was like their winter edition, whatever. They have 2 articles in there. Well, they have a whole series of articles on the decade called A Decade on the Left, where they look back 10 years, what the left has not accomplished.
But we felt most able to talk about the US and UK cases. And didn't even want to attempt to sound like we knew anything about
Podemos or Syriza. One of these days we should educate ourselves. There's no reason not to. But yeah, so they interviewed Jeremy Corbyn and they interviewed Brianna Joy Gray, press secretary for the Sanders campaign. What did we learn from that? My first note just says "goddamn Parliament." I guess that's for Jeremy Corbyn, because he had the quote about the Labour Party can't win if it just goes after a Westminster campaign.
Yeah, I suppose there was a certain element to both of the narratives or explanations of events that were presented by both of the interviewees in those 2 interviews, which smacked a little of the kind of liberal view of politics that we'd learnt about from
100%
Miliband to some extent.
100%.
And it's the extent that they both seem to have expected to be playing on an even field, kind of thing, to be treated fairly by the political establishment.
Certainly more so in the Sanders camp, I would say.
But
you're right.
I mean, certainly. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn in that interview wanted to be very moralising about the parliamentary Labour Party and
How do they sleep at
and
night?
also like the other agents in the Labour Party
Yeah.
for disrupting his efforts to. Yeah, I don't know what his efforts were, but anyway.
Yeah. Community organizing, I guess.
Yeah. I
Strangling
mean,
the
in a
CLPs
single
and-
case, yeah, but just
Yeah.
generally, more broadly, undermining his leadership
Yeah.
throughout.
He's got his
tenure.
current events pod. He started his little NGO or whatever it is. What's it called? The Peace and Prosperity
Justice,
or something
Peace and
like
Prosperity.
that. Justice, yeah, something like that. Something
Yeah,
vague.
yeah.
I was like, he's starting a podcast because he tweeted, he was like, watch this space for a big announcement. I was like, he's starting a podcast, 100%. He should have just started a
Corbyn's
podcast.
not going to start a podcast.
He could.
Yeah,
We could produce it for him.
sure.
Jeremy, come on the pod. I know you have nothing better to do. Come on. But yeah, I don't know. What else did we get from that? It was interesting. I think that the comparison between reading an interview with Corbyn and then an interview with someone who was really engaged in Sanders' campaign was an interesting kind of comparison. I would have liked to have seen what other people, possibly more radical than Corbyn, who worked for his campaign, would have said in interviews. Potentially
We
someone
can
like
find those interviews.
yeah, potentially someone I don't know, like someone who's in this room, or like I don't know. It was really interesting seeing Brianna Joy Gray talk about the press and what she expected from the press versus what she got. And it goes to show that at least at a federal level, radical politics have such a long way to go in America, really, even as compared to Corbyn. And the other thing that I got from it that I think we both talked about on the episode was how interesting it was that even though it has such a long way to go, and even though Sanders is basically still a liberal, he's like a social democrat who would, his foreign policy is like nothing different from really anybody else in the Democratic Party. How excited so many communists and socialists and people like that got in America. And I still haven't really come to terms with that. Even with myself. It was like, I don't know, was it just a breadcrumb? Was it just like, well, we were dreaming about something that could happen? Was it just that we haven't had anything like that in recent memory, at least in my generation? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. There is a broader question for me, which I'm still kind of working on the answer to, which is how to connect one's involvement with sort of an established, potentially, if you're being generous, sort of centre-left Social Democratic Party. How to connect an engagement with that to a commitment to, I guess, broadly speaking, a revolutionary politics.
Sure.
And what the utility is in engaging with the Labour Party if your ultimate aim is a horizon which is infinitely more radical and revolutionary than one held by the broad swathe of people involved with the Labour Party, and certainly with anyone in Parliament and its leadership kind of thing. I don't know whether it's just simply as you say, kind of like a desperate scrambling toward whatever it is that seems to be current and happening to be of relevance. Whether it's just that we saw the name socialist attached to some of these characters, and so we were like, oh, well, we're with them clearly.
Well, I mean, everybody talks about, the impossibility of pushing someone like Joe Biden left, right? And like, if we just get Joe Biden in, like, dude, we'll be able to like change him through public pressure and stuff, and like the kind of like the unreality, the non-reality of that, right?
Yeah.
The kind of craziness of that. But also it's like, it's the same thing with Sanders. I mean, we're going to push Bernie Sanders left. It's like, I think the point of a Sanders presidency, if that ever happened, would have been perhaps something more to do with class consciousness, maybe.
Yeah.
And I mean, you hear a lot of leftists in America talk about, actually, it's more so like liberals, like, advising leftists about like, you just need one thing and stick with it. And as we saw, I think with Reagan, there was a lot of single issue stuff going on there that just made him president. And a lot of people kind of say, if you really want to get elected, you just have to focus on one thing. And it's generally kind of thought of as that one thing would be Medicare for all, right?
Sure,
you just need that one thing.
Yeah. I mean, the alternate strategy that's usually put is some form of community organizing or sort of single issue campaigning. what do they call it? Base building.
Base building.
Like you go to where people are and you try and solve their problems.
Yeah.
Um,
Base and superstructure building.
and hope by engaging with them at the level of their needs without asking anything in return.
Yeah.
Become to recognize the sort of like worthwhileness of you as people or your politics in general. Either that opens up a space for you to talk about politics, or maybe they never adopt your politics but always look favorably upon you as somebody who can lend aid or who can lead, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, to some extent, that what I'm describing there is sort of the classical Leninist strategy of like the vanguard party.
ML Dan.
I mean, not necessarily in the hands of like Lenin and the Bolsheviks in 1917. Like, it was certainly a winning strategy in the sense of like,
sure, they won.
But managed to be a relative minority party at the beginning of that revolutionary period, but to some extent by having the right answers or being in the right places at the right times or being leading the right campaigns or blah 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 blah, sort of like won influence and power with the masses that mattered, kind of thing.
So I remember a long time ago you said something about like politics at this point can't be about convincing people; it needs to be about winning. And that kind of smacks of that a little bit, but it's also like I've been thinking about that, and a lot of it is just convincing people who their enemies are, right? That's so much of it is just, no, God damn it, these people are your enemies. Look, you just want to like smack people and be like, look at this. So it's like maybe if with this kind of like lib advice to the lefties about like just focus on Medicare for all, which I'm not standing, so to speak, that would just be a Sanders presidency would have just been at least pharmaceutical companies are your enemies. At least don't trust them. You know, not do, well, you know what I mean.
I mean, I suppose there's an extent to which like not just that campaign, but Medicare for all plus whatever you want to do, kind of thing. Don't tie yourself down to any one thing. But yeah, you raise a really interesting point, and it's the one that like jumps into people's mind when they get most frustrated with the state of the world and sort of the general public's willingness to sort of acquiesce to the most sort of like ludicrous activities of like the ruling class or the ruling class's like representatives in a political arena, like political parties or whatever. Like why are people still so attached to Boris Johnson?
I don't know, man.
What a ludicrous character.
I just
and someone whose track record of tenure is sort of unmitigated failure.
And just trying to kill you. Doing his best to murder you.
But yeah, there is a question of like, do we just not have access to people in the way that would be necessary to be able to actually set the narrative about who the enemy is, kind of thing.
Well, you have to prove it to people. You can't just be like on Twitter and social media and Democracy Now. I don't know. I was trying to think of like the most left thing I could think of. Yeesh. And just scold people for being idiots and you fool. This is right. Look at this theory. Oh God, that's literally exactly what we're doing. But you have to prove it to people. You have to show people that like, yeah, pharmaceutical companies are your enemies. But you know why? Is because they're operating in a market and all they want to do is make money. So they won't treat your cancer because they'll make more money not treating your cancer. It's the same thing with everybody. I don't know. I took off my beanie because I'm getting heated. But yeah, you know what I mean. Anyway,
certainly,
who says we're not a current events podcast? We're talking about Jeremy Corbyn and Bernie Sanders.
Very current.
7 out of 10.
For
the Tribune stuff.
6.
6. Fair enough.
Even because Tribune's apparently our enemy. And also we didn't understand that last question that was asked of Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That was so weird. Such like a weird in-joke with him and Ronan Burtonshaw.
But I mean, I guess the place that we ended that podcast, and what was nice for me about that episode was that we ended a sort of almost like quite a spontaneously generated place, one that I hadn't expected to end up, which was a discussion about what we've just talked about, right? Which is
let's get back into it.
Like, which is a strategy primarily focused on sort of like base building or community organizing. Would be the way to build support for a political project in a political party, regardless of whichever party that is, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's certainly something the Labour Party should have engaged in more so than they did, perhaps.
I am willing to, even just for my own sanity, believe the simplistic narrative of they were doing that and then Brexit stuff happened. So
Sure. Yeah.
why not? I'm at a 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
I've gone down 1.
Oh, okay.
Let's move on before
Oh,
before I drop any more. Well, you said her name, Dan, 15 or 20 minutes ago. Episodes 3 and 4 of Auxiliary Statements, the podcast. Ellen Meekson's Wood, The Origin of Capitalism. This was, I believe, this was the one book that we've read all of.
Whole book.
And I said to you last night when you saw me staring at the
Oh
donuts.
God, you're going to tell them we're committed to do that.
No. Just that that was the one that I got the most of, and you were like, "Well, yeah, it's because we read the whole book."
Well, I think it was you that said.
Well,
it was a whole
roles
book that we
were
read.
reversed. Maybe I said it all. Who knows? I had donuts on the brain. Still do, honestly. But yeah, wow, what a book. What a book.
Yeah.
Excellent. Love it. She's great, and cool that she wrote the intro to the Miliband,
Sure.
and now we read that. I guess that's probably what inspired it. Potentially,
I just had it in mind as something that
we should read.
Yeah.
Glad we did.
Yeah, it's the one thing. If when we were setting out, and I had this sort of aspiration of there being at least an element to the podcast which was directly educational, not educating ourselves, but to some extent like offering education to the listener, or some insight.
Yeah.
I sort of had this aspiration of almost being syllabus-esque in a kind of like, sort of having a podcast that was kind of like a primer on certain ideas.
Sure.
Now I don't think we can necessarily follow through with that, although that trajectory can run parallel to our own education, and
absolutely
we can do it at the same time. And
disclaimer.
But to some extent, that book was the one that I started out thinking that we should talk about, certainly. And I just find, I find it a really fascinating. Well, it was really important to me when I first read it, and as an early idea to seed in one's head that sort of capitalism had this very specific beginning.
Yeah.
And it has certain traits that make capitalism specific, or that make the economic system that we call capitalism specific and different from other economic systems.
Yeah.
I think it's a very useful thing to have and to hold and to sort of like deploy on other occasions when you're sort of thinking about theory or these ideas of one sort or other. And then again, that she follows this very kind of like fine detailed that she could that theory of the transition from feudalism to capitalism, and I suppose the broader theory it offers for transitions of that sort both manages to hold that there are distinct economic modes of production, but there isn't a big hard break in between them. There is this sort of like transitional process, and so that you can both see history as both a long span of one period of time that has a course and a trajectory running throughout it, and then it also has these specific periods overlaid above it, kind of thing,
which are almost random, right? Almost the point where it's like she made a couple of really good points where it's like, coming out of feudalism, it could have been this, could have been this, could have been this,
yes,
could have been this. It wasn't any of these. It was this weird thing that was made up on this syphilitic island, no offense, on the edge of the world. I almost said foggy, but I like syphilitic's one of my favorite words. And yeah, just random. Really, really a great book to read if you want to knock the goddamn commercialization model out of everybody's heads, which is really important to do for one reason, because this theory of like, people are always capitalists, dude. And so it's just the end goal, the natural thing. One, it's very hopeful to see the beginning, to see the end. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's also, just that randomness of it is kind of freaky, right? It's kind of freaky that like that happened and that's the way that we do things now, and that's just kind of how it is.
Yeah.
But it's also really important too for just knocking that, like I said, knocking that narrative out of people's heads, because that makes you realize kind of it's as close, I think, to a red pill as we've come on this show, just because it's like if you were to plant this information in someone's head who was just like a lib capitalist, they would go, oh my God, everything I believe is a lie. Because it's like, this isn't the natural way of doing things. This isn't the way people have always done it.
Sure.
And it doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, important book.
Yeah, there are some interesting things that come off of it. One is that like the degree to which it can lead us into other fields kind of thing. It can lead us into questions of human nature. It can lead us into questions of sort of social anthropology to some extent. Yeah, I think that's something that it would be really good for us to sort of pin down in future. And there are certainly books on sort of other modes of production and other sort of periods of transition. I'd quite like to fill out our sort of our knowledge and also sort of like our back catalogue with episodes which sort of fill out history to some extent. And there are certainly some books that I could think of that I've been meaning to try and get hold of and read. So I'd quite like to read Marshall Solons's book on Stone Age economics.
Whoa, that sounds cool.
Which would perhaps complement that also. That Marshall Solons's an anthropologist. So
cool. Like the Stone Age.
So that would be one to go with.
Cool.
What else does Ellen Mixes Wood make me think of?
What does she? I liked learning about the distinction that she had between primitive accumulation as we make a bunch of money and now we can make more money, as primitive accumulation of capital as social relations. But that was really important to understand and to parse. And it's an easy book to read. It is a verso book. It is an easy book to read, though, because of the way, we've talked about this a couple times, the way that it's written, in that you know what's coming next and you know how she's going to structure everything. And so, it was good to read in that sense.
Yeah.
Fully recommended.
One of the things I was just thinking about then was something for us to think about going forward is to ask ourselves whether there is any truth in the kind of like Marxist theory that once you have some understanding of history, you can intervene in its process in a way that we can take away some of the randomness that you were talking about to some extent. Like, are we now in a position to understand history in the way it works, the way it changes, and the way it moves, kind of thing? And does it leave us better able to intervene to any extent? I mean, looking back, it was in the first of the two episodes that we did on that where we sort of found ourselves a bit sort of undone by this idea that to some extent it was quite random. This random jostling of class relations under feudalism gave this other outcome, which then spurred on a total change in social relations, kind of thing. Obviously, that book also makes the case, and that argument makes the case for looking to class conflict as the thing which propels or motivates changes in economic mode of production, kind of
totally
thing. There is an Ellen Mixes Wood essay I'd like to read quite soon on E.P. Thompson's theories of class, which I think might help us sort of like progress some of those ideas.
And I think we gave that a little bit of short shrift in that episode. We didn't talk about Thompson a whole lot.
Yeah.
So
he came up
very good.
Yeah, he came up very briefly, didn't he? But basically in the context of well, obviously like referencing his big book, the origins, the makings of the English working class, and he's basically sort of suggesting that the class came about like much earlier than people would have thought, and had all these sort of attendant sort of cultural motivations and things attached to it. I don't know. Anyway, we'll find out.
Totally. Yeah,
Maybe cut all that because it was nice.
I think it's interesting. I saw a Hobsbawm book that I was going to get today because I've never read any Hobsbawm. Didn't because it was super expensive.
I was just reading some Hobsbawm.
Really?
Which
one?
I've had a book.
Which book?
It's a collection of essays. It's called like Revolutionaries or something. And I've had it for like 10 years maybe. And I rescued it from a bag of books that was going to the charity shop the other day, and now wonder whether it might be quite interesting to read.
Yeah.
I'll show it to you.
I know he's written a bit about what he wrote a book on historiography, which was the one I was going to get, which seemed really, really interesting. But there was a section in that book about what do we owe Marx as historians, which could be really interesting. Get into a little historiography and whatnot, study history. 11 out of 10.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
She rocks, folks. She rocks. Episode 5. Jack Sipes.
Oh yeah.
We dipped our teeny little toes into the teeny little pond of cultural theory. Actually, an enormous pond, the enormous pond of cultural theory, perhaps too large, to see what it means when entertainment gets commodified. And it was an enlightening and confusing experience, I think. It was, I do think that, much like a lot of like hard scientists, my understanding of this comes from the show Bones, kind of make fun of psychology as being like, well, how can you base that on anything? It's not a hard science where you're just talking about people's feelings and you just have theories. That's what Bones says. Cultural theory is a little bit like that too, Marxist cultural theory, because it's like when you talk about what it means to commodify entertainment, which is a hugely, I think, important thing to talk about, just in terms of ideology and whatnot and all the crap that we're consuming, it becomes hard to get into some hard facts and prove what you're saying beyond a gut feeling. And a lot of Frankfurt School stands are probably going to yell at me for that, but it's true. And there's no getting around it. So I think the best that we can do is find someone that you kind of trust and maybe agree with before you kind of like know what you're getting into. Try and go into it with a critical eye, obviously. But I think that's kind of what we attempted to do with Jack Sipes, again, because he's written about
Jack Sipes because he likes Lord of the Rings.
Because he likes Lord of the Rings. He likes Tolkien. Maybe he's written about it a lot.
Oh, okay.
And I do like Ernst Bloch. The stuff of his that I've tried to read is crazy. I've read some of his essays are really, really fascinating. I tried to read his big book. It's called like Philosophy of Hope or something like that. And I was just like, come on. But yeah, it was an interesting experience, a necessary one. And I think the discussion of why cultural theory is so outweighed in Marxism is one that needs to be had. Sorry, but it does.
Oh, outweighed in the sense that it's something that Marxists
a lot of Marxists there and not a lot anywhere else.
Sure. Okay.
I guess. I don't know. At least universities, right? Which is kind of where you find Marxists, and that's about it. Yeah. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, it was a fun episode. I think that I wasn't in the best position to represent the text to some extent. So there were certainly ways in which I misunderstood or didn't fully grasp what it was that he was going after. It's certainly a topic that we are going to come back to.
Yeah.
I remember being quite caught off guard. You asked me a question about what the utopian elements of Star Trek were, and I was kind of like, I'm not prepared for this at all.
Oh God! Oh shit!
Maybe
I
that's
wonder
to be returned to.
Yeah,
we could talk. We can have that conversation now, perhaps. Yeah. Although I'm no better prepared than I was.
Some of his essay that was, like we said, that was published in a journal for aesthetic education, and I think that could possibly account for some of the writing in it. Right.
I see.
Some of his other stuff. He has a whole book on Ernst Bloch, I believe. I think it's
I think you've sent me a PDF.
Yeah, and there are a couple chapters in there that would be a lot more enlightening because they're a little bit more academic, and because he's studying a philosopher and whatnot. I think that I kind of don't have a lot of brain power dedicated to philosophy. I hate to say it, just because like straight philosophy, as it doesn't relate to anything else, doesn't relate to politics or economics or anything like that, I have a really hard time with. And my eyes just kind of glaze over. I wish I could, but so that's kind of why I think I was at first attracted to Jack Sipes, because it's him talking. It's like filtered. He's talking about a philosopher who I'd probably quite like if I understood and bothered to read all of. But yeah.
Sure, yeah, I think I have a similar experience with philosophy in that you really have to know what context it's supposed to be applied to.
Yeah.
I mean, that context is there and can be found, but like,
yeah.
If you've got limited willingness, like Jack and I have, to put the effort in,
yeah, it's all effort.
You need a little bit of hand holding.
Yeah, exactly.
Jack Sipes, hold my hand.
Hold my hand, please. It's also got a great name, the first half of it at least.
Yeah. I thought it was Zips.
Zips. Zip. Zoom.
But that was a fun. It was a fun episode to just talk about like
Warhammer, Star Trek,
and cultural stuff like that. Give the listener a taste of our taste.
Yeah.
Or lack thereof.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder how our experience with reading that would have been altered, because we read Ellen Meakson's Wood, Jack Sipes, Althusser. I wonder how it would have gone if we went Ellen Meakson's Wood, Althusser, Jack Sipes, because it was very we talked about this on the show, was very abrupt, going from Ellen Meakson's Wood to Jack Sipes, and the way that that specific piece was written.
Sure, yeah, I don't know which was more difficult or clear.
Yeah. I don't
Well,
know
we did.
either.
Yeah, we did the Miliband in between those two, did we not? We did Zipes
Oh,
Miliband and then
you're right.
Althusser.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah.
So Althusser was kind of like
On an island.
inspired by, I suppose Miliband's light criticism of him, or at least like things that he had said about him. Yeah, another episode where I found myself quite lost to some extent.
Yeah.
Questioning my ability
My
to
existence.
to turn this material into listenable podcast content.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you listen to all of that and got anything out of it, I'd be delighted to hear what it was.
Bless you if you did.
I'm
I'm going to go 7.5 out of 10.
Oh, this is for Zipes.
For Zips.
Zips.
Yeah.
Zips.
Yeah. Because a lot of those ideas I vibe with.
Yeah.
Vibe with them.
Yeah. I need to give it a number.
Ooh. Drum roll, please.
7.5 as well.
All right.
I agree.
There you go. Good.
I agree. If I go less, Jack will be disappointed. And if I go up, Jack will just have to come up to meet me.
I'd be like, actually, I was actually going to say 9 out of 10. Skipping over episode 6, because we already talked about that. Miliband, getting into episode 7. You heard his name, folks. Louis Al, short for Alfred Thurzer. What's it called? Ideological state apparatuses.
Notes towards
an investigation. Yeah, so we said that this was, I think, the first thing that we read that was like, I want to be a guy that calls myself a Marxist. What do I read?
Yeah, I don't know whether that is true of that text, or I suppose it's true.
It's one that gets tossed around quite a bit.
It's true of an academic introduction to Marxism, I suppose, and Marxism's influence on academia.
Sure. Also, I suppose, just for no other reason that it gets criticized a lot, and it's something that everybody has read. Much like, well, actually, I was going to say much like Rosa Luxemburg's Reform or Revolution, but I don't think everybody has read that. They just criticize it. But yeah.
I've never read that. Maybe we could read that.
Yeah. Yeah, we should. Yeah, why not? Yeah, this Althusser episode, we spent 20 to 25 to 30 minutes at the beginning talking about how we were just not going to give it any kind of shrift, let alone short shrift. And we proceeded to give it some kind of shrift, I believe. What shrift that was, let us know. But that was an interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly it put on the broad tapestry of our podcast. It laid upon the table sort of
the gentle weaving.
Yeah, well, it gave us something to counterpose to the Miliband to some extent.
Yeah,
Meekson's
which is
Wood
good.
approach, right?
Yeah,
a much more less historical, much more philosophical, and then also sort of broadly structuralist, I suppose, and also a position which sought to defend sort of a base and superstructure distinction, which had been which finds quite a lot of criticism in some of those other thinkers that we had been reading.
Sure.
So it was nice to have something to counterpose to that.
Yeah, that's important, I think.
It definitely set up some avenues for us to approach in the future, particularly in trying to learn what some of that terminology actually meant.
Yeah, exactly.
Means. I think if I can put a bit of a caveat on it, to be kinder to it to some extent, like there was certainly aspects of his kind of like theory of subject, so we say, or like the theory of ideology. His theory of ideology is a very sort of broad theory of subjectivity to some extent. That's sort of how human belief systems work. That maybe we didn't represent in the best possible way, or maybe
No way.
maybe if we were interested in that more so, then we would have. One could get quite a lot out of it, kind of thing.
Yes, I think so. I absolutely agree.
So there's certainly, and it certainly fits into quite an interesting, which I thought, given that I have some sort of interest in psychoanalysis and Lacan, and as I have sort of ostensibly read some amount of Slavoj Žižek, like I would have thought that I might have been able to understand more of Althusser than there actually was.
Wait a minute, I've read Slavoj Žižek and I don't understand this.
Yeah. I mean, it just points out that maybe I never really understood Slavoj Žižek to some extent. But from a philosophical perspective, there are theories of ideology and subjectivity, which we haven't grappled with yet, and you ought if you wish to.
You ought to.
And read some Althusser if you
That's
wish.
why use this podcast to see what you're interested in, folks. I say that like I said that like it was ironic, but yeah, it's true. Because obviously you're not going to be us. And if you're listening to a lot of shows that where the people are perhaps smarter than us, they're going to be like, potentially, you should be interested in this. But fuck it, Dan and I don't even know what we're interested in. So that's what we're doing.
That's
so
true, yeah.
Figured it
That's
out.
a nice way to look at it. We can't tell you what to be interested in because we don't have a clue.
We have no idea. Ideology, it's a big word, and we did it. We figured it out. Does make me want to read, just because Miliband talks quite a bit about Gramsci, and he's like, nobody really had tried to develop a big theory of, kind of like Gramscian, like common sense ideology, what role that plays in Marxism before him. We really should eventually try and tackle that. I know you're saying notoriously hard to read.
Yeah, we can find something. I found a few essays and books that were written about him.
Oh, hey, wow, perfect.
Perry Anderson, who came up as somebody who was criticised quite a lot by Ellen Leaks's Wood, wrote both a book and a notable essay on Gramsci. So
Cool.
Maybe we'll read one of those instead.
We have said we won't read any more Italians, but let's read. I'm sorry, we won't read any more French people.
Yeah.
Let's read some Italians.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is also I might quite enjoy making a historic return for me to reading some left communists and maybe some people in the sort of like communization tradition.
Cool.
Who have a very particular reading of what has happened to the working class and their revolutionary potential, and has their revolutionary potential been so thoroughly diminished that we need some other way
to just skip to communism? Let's
some other. Do we need some other theory of sort of political transition or political agency or political action kind of thing?
Sure.
Now, there are a particular case, that theory of the efficacy of tying your politics in with the working class, the proletariat, is a much broader critique and shared by a great many people in various different ways, kind of thing. So maybe that's something we can read around more broadly.
Sure.
We haven't really answered necessarily yet. Is the working class worth it, or is it worth our efforts, or does it still have some revolutionary potential kind of thing? Certainly an avenue for investigation or discussion.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we almost got there with reading Communizers. We did read an anarchist. So. There you go. In my head, I was just thinking.
Louis has an ardent left communist.
Ardent communist.
Or anarchist or something.
An anarchist. We have the video evidence. We're speaking Italian, oddly enough.
It's true. Maybe if I'm making corrections, like in that podcast, Jack was correct.
Yes.
Althusser does say he is an anarchist.
Well, I don't know why he was saying that, really, from that fragment of an interview.
Well, yeah.
He's basically...
he says it because the ultimate aspiration and aim of both communists, Marxists and anarchists, is a classless society. And so, I mean, their political aims are the same. It's a question of sort of strategy and trajectory and also broad theory.
Drop the soundbite now where he goes, "Non sono comunisti."
Non sono comunista.
I think that's really funny. I don't know why. Italians, they're just funny people. Love them. Yes.
Even French people speaking Italian.
Even for oh god, yeah, you're right. Maybe not so funny.
Italian in general.
I don't know if I can give this one a score because I don't think I really got it too much.
Yeah. We're NA. We're not in a position.
Not applicable. Not anarchist.
We are not in a position to
rate.
Yeah.
Louis Althusser.
Or our criticism was so heavily laden with our ignorance that it would be unfair.
Exactly. Moving on to something that I know a little bit more about, we had a relatively unplanned little California series these last 2 episodes, didn't we? And I enjoyed that quite a bit. It was as close as we've come, other than the trivia and stuff, to being a current events pod. And so, yeah, the first one, What was it? Oh yeah, we read Mike Davis, Prisoners of the American Dream, the one section of it. The New Rights Road to Power. Love it. Love Mike Davis. It was good. California is bad. It is a bad bellwether, almost as bad as Ohio. And yes,
I think it's been my favorite episode.
really, that's cool. I
Sort of
think mine too.
Experientially for me, I suppose, in the
Oh,
sense
okay.
that like to have read something, to synthesize it, to have what seemed like a useful conversation.
It was useful.
It felt like we knew to some extent what we were talking about.
Took us 8 episodes. We got there.
I know, and also kind of like as a thing to read, it felt. I suppose coming back to the idea of reading things that aren't directly Marxist theoretical, and then applying it or potentially identifying it as information that you could use to build
Totally.
theory later
Totally.
on, kind of thing.
Totally.
Even if we didn't come away with any big theoretical truths then and there, it was fun to look at something which was engaging in a sort of class analysis of the American bourgeoisie in a certain period of time, and also like questions of political strategizing and how political strategy and action correlated, runs parallel to economic and class analysis
Yeah.
in various ways.
Yeah. It was really fantastic. And I think, too, one of the reasons that was just because it was relatively fresh, the events that happened, and felt very reminiscent of perhaps what has recently been happening. And if we use that as a guide, then we'll see what happens after Trump. But yeah, it's interesting. Really, really interesting. It was freaky drawing the line from Reagan to all the way back to Taft and the New Deal, because you really start to realize just how much we are still, even though it's been completely crushed, living in the shadow of America's attempt at social democracy
Yeah.
and the huge retaliation against that. And its success for 15 years as FDR was kind of there, and it's until it's slow crumbling halt in the 70s or whatever, whenever you want to put that. The 80s, I guess, is kind of, with Reagan or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, that was really interesting for me to see quite
Yeah.
how 20th century, is that right? American politics was defined so much by the New Deal and the sort of
Still is,
legacy of the
too.
New Deal. And yeah, I mean, even in, I mean, as you were saying about the sort of political aspirations of the left today, very similar to still trying to establish in the US. I mean, you had a sort of social democratic welfare state to some extent.
Yeah.
But it was never as established as what was developed in Western Europe or various elements
Totally.
of Western Europe. And it's just one of the ways in which America is sort of unique along compared to a great many others, kind of thing. Has a really interesting political, economic, social history.
Yeah.
Which should not be seen as a parallel to any of the European countries, kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
really quite bespoke and unique.
Bespoke.
And something we should talk at much greater length about.
Yeah.
Be really interesting to dig into the American political sort of party system to some extent. Which, I mean, there are essays in that book which are related to that, but we could go all the way back to the sort of post-revolutionary period,
Yeah.
or sort of changes in the 19th century kind of thing.
What's one thing I've been thinking about ever since reading this is how freaky it is that obviously FDR didn't end class society. He didn't even want to come close, obviously, to doing that. He didn't end the power of the financial classes, but he restrained them in a way that we've never seen since, with Glass-Steagall, as we said in the episode, with insurance on bank accounts, whatever that's called, with just everybody going, okay, Wall Street sucks. Let's chill them out for a little bit. But it's freaky seeing how, even though FDR was able to do that, he and many other people after him were never able to get anything close to a public option for healthcare. And I don't know what that says. I don't know if it just says that, that lobby was just strong, but it's you can't say how strong Wall Street is, right? And I just think it's odd that was the one thing that, not the one thing, obviously there's quite a bit I would like to have seen happen, but that was the one thing that just, no, is never going to happen. Never going to get a public option. Healthcare is you make too much money off of healthcare. I guess that's what it is. I'd like to kind of look into that because the American Medical Association,
Yeah.
like, what the hell?
Yeah. I wonder
crazy.
whether there's something to do with how American healthcare was structured. Whether because although the NHS was inaugurated in, what was it, 48, a sort of to the extent that its lineage can be traced back to the Attlee government. I suppose you could date it to 45 kind of thing. But there were also efforts in place to, I mean, there'd been a sort of nascent something. I think the NHS. My understanding is the NHS was based on a system that was already kind of in operation in London, kind of thing. There were already sort of nascent elements to it, and also it might be interesting to compare like British liberalism to it's an analog in America, or even its absence, perhaps, kind of thing.
Sure.
Maybe there is a liberal tradition in Britain, which sort of laid the groundwork for a kind of like paternalistic, a sort of paternalistic liberalism laid the groundwork for a social democratic welfare state, which included a nationalised health service.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to look at the American case and see whether what there was that was absent, whether FDR really had to force the reforms of the New Deal onto America in a way that doesn't have a parallel in the UK or other European countries, whether the American political system had that sort of like paternalistic liberal element that I'm sort of suggesting that the British one kind of did.
Sure.
Maybe it was just that the US is a much younger country, gotten to a point
Much bigger, much less
much bigger, I suppose. As well. Yeah, I really don't know.
I read something about the history of the NHS as you could kind of trace its origins back to mutual aid societies that were kind of like people being like, okay, well, we just don't have doctors. Let's all pool our money so we can get a doctor.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like people being like, this is pretty good. I like this idea. So when someone like Bevan or whoever it was,
so maybe it doesn't have its analog, doesn't have its any lineage in British liberalism. Maybe it has more of a connection to British socialism, or like mutual aid, as you say, sort of trade union organisations, or like just workers' organisations.
I would hesitate
not
to
even trade union, just like just workers' organisation of to something to meet their basic needs kind of thing, because there was an absence of
it seems like socialism.
What was happening in America at the same time, kind of thing.
Not that.
Is it something to do with the sort of like relatively spread out population? Maybe did it not have industrial centres in the way that the UK did?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think
whether it's geographical, whether it's demographic, whether it's whatever kind of thing.
Yeah, because I get the feeling socialism kind of only grabbed onto it when it was like, oh, we can use this as a political tool. Talking out of my ass, don't know, but I think that a lot of it, I don't know.
Yeah, interesting to read about early 19th century
totally
American socialism kind of thing.
Yeah, it would. I'd like to read something about the communist schools, about the Communist Party, the history of the Communist Party, and there's a lot to get into there. You know, the schools, about infiltration, about how well that all worked, about why Maoism in the 60s and 70s, and there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot that would be really interesting. But yeah, anyway.
It's all coming, folks.
It's all coming. It's all on the horizon, on our syllabus.
When we know, we'll let you know.
Yeah. It planned out 15 episodes ahead. Other thing it took from the Mike Davis was just how disciplined all those right-wing chuds were. They just figured out a way that it would work. You just get the money behind it. You make whatever you want to happen because of how disciplined these freaks were. And that's the thing, though. That's the bummer about it. It's like you can do all the organizing as a leftist as you want, but it's like you're not going to get the money that they have to send mail to everybody, I guess, or that would have been in the 80s, or have the resources. And so, bummer.
Yeah.
Bummer. Anything else from the Mike Davis you want to talk about? What else did we do? I didn't make notes for this one for today, so I'm just kind of talking. What you said about the distinct bourgeoisie classes and stuff and all that was quite interesting. Good stuff.
It goes a long way to explaining the state of American politics now.
It does. Sadly, it does, folks. I miss Ronald Reagan. Miss Ronald Reagan. 8.5 to 9 out of 10. Fuck it, 9 out of 10.
Okay.
Love it.
Okay.
You know what? Honestly, this rating system makes no sense because I think I enjoyed reading this more than I've enjoyed reading the Miliband, but I still really enjoyed reading the Miliband. So I don't know.
We really should have started the podcast by laying out our criteria for how we were judging the books. Maybe we should have had some subcategories.
Yeah.
And then we could have scored all the books on
true.
various different levels.
Episode 20.
Yeah. Whatever. 9.
Whatever. 9.
9.
And then we rounded out our long anticipated Californian series with the Californian Ideology. Richard Barbarick, Andy Cameron. I almost said David Cameron. Andy Cameron, episode 9. Excellent. Very good. All about the new free market ideology and how so much of it has to do with a loose collection of freaks, nerds, and geeks, was I believe the quote, from Silicon Valley and from the Bay Area. And like Mike Davis said, many a tawdry tale begins in California, spreads like a vicious disease to the rest of the country, and indeed, in this case, to the world. Yeah, very good. I really enjoyed reading it. I'd read it before a couple times, but I think that this is something that deserves to kind of be up there with the, like, you should read this if you want to be a lefty. And yeah, very good.
Yeah, it was fun. It was good. Obviously, it complemented the Davis reading quite nicely and sort of extended some of those ideas. We obviously need to dig more into various aspects of the I always wanted to say alt left, the new left. The new left in the 60s and 70s. So much about that sort of politics I don't really understand, and how to situate it in relation to left-wing politics more broadly. Yes, I'd like to read more of that. I'd like to maybe even then use that to influence an effort to engage with the Mark Fisher and his acid communism stuff.
Interesting.
So it'd be quite nice to jump from one to the other, or to let one influence the next and the next.
Yeah.
I wonder what in our analysis we may have generalized quite a lot about the new left and sort of painted it as, or at least I did perhaps, paint it as entirely fixated on sort of like liberating the individual and having this sort of individualistic focus.
It is painted in this as like a very specific part of the new left from a very specific part of the country.
Yeah. But it's interesting that like it's just stating the obvious, I suppose, but like certain aspects of hippieism found a very happy home in amongst the muck of the new right,
the muck and the filth
of the neoliberal transition.
Yeah.
And it is quite interesting, like some of the slightly sort of like sci-fi predictions and sort of like sort of like criticism of the sort of like the post-humanist fixation of these characters, whilst not being entirely borne out. I mean, I think it probably does go some way to explaining the weirdness of some of these sort of like our contemporary crop of like tech billionaires and
absolutely. As inspired by, well, it's just these people, these Musks, these Bezos, these Bezai, these who's the guy, Microsoft guy, Gates.
Oh, Gates. Yeah. I mean, Zuckerberg doesn't really fit into that, although he is.
No, Zuckerberg kind of does.
At the same
Zuckerberg
time.
kind of does, because like all these people, Taz Epstein in there, quite frankly, they all want to seem like they've got it all figured out, and that's why I'm on top of the world. And to have it figured out in modern society, it's like you have to be like somewhat socially liberal, as these people claim to be, right? Not saying that they are. But you still have to have that new right ideology of like, well, of course free markets works because I'm Elon Musk and my father told me they do, and I made a ton of money, so you can too, right?
Sure.
And I think that, this essay went a long way to explaining where that came from, because it kind of made a rotting ideology before, like, as it started, of the Reaganism crap. It made it cool, much like for a lot of the far right-wing people. Reagan was made cool because he spoke at NRA conversations and had Anita Baker talking about, like, basically just, like, murdering gay people, and, like, Phyllis Schlafly basically being like, women suck. It's the same thing. It's like, this ideology has to be made cool, and this was the way that it was made cool and acceptable to be a free marketeer. Because if you think about it for 5 seconds, it's like, wow, that's the worst ideology ever. I hate it. It's like, I forget who said it, but someone said quite a few times, like, if the Republican Party said what their actual platforms were, they would never get a single vote, which, whatever, we'll put that aside for however true that is. But it's like, it's the same idea. It's like, Musk's Twitter presence veils the fact that he's just another capitalist in a long line of pigs, right? Like, he's just, it's the same trough, so to speak.
Yeah. I wonder
yeah.
whether also certain aspects of that reading can tell us some things about the nature of contemporary American liberalism,
Yeah.
or at least, like,
Totally.
where some of those things have come from, right? The tech billionaires and other tech workers' willingness to claim a sort of commitment to liberation, whilst also not only tolerating but also benefiting from even more and more egregious types of exploitation.
Yeah.
Their sort of blindness to the sort of, like, the sort of exploitative reality of the world in which they've established might have a parallel in sort of, like, centrist Democrats sort of
Yeah.
equal willingness to sort of
Yeah.
certain aspects of the ideology of contemporary American liberalism. And,
Yeah. Odds are,
and
if you're one of
Democratic
these
Party mainstream.
Yeah, if you're one of these cool free market liberals, you have the same economics as Trump. You just do. I hate to say it,
Yeah.
but you do. So, put that in your pipe and smoke it, as the hippies would say. 15 out of 10. Why not? Look at that.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Yeah. So yeah. Some collection of ones and zeros.
Yeah, exactly.
If I knew some binary, I could do a binary joke, but I don't. So whatever the
What's
binary
1,
is
0,
for 10.
10.
0, 1? Yeah, 1. I don't know.
Some collection, as you say.
Some collection.
So that rounds it out.
Yeah.
10 episodes. 10 episodes. We did it. Here's our first clip show. I do think, I think it's kind of important to kind of go back and look at what we've read, because, like, when we read it, we have like a week to read it, and then we talk about it, and you need things to compost a bit more and to kind of rot in your brain to think about them a bit more. So I think it's kind of important to do these things, even if we come out of the same thing as, like, Althusser is impossible to read.
Yeah, and it's also quite easy to do these episodes really thinking you want to talk about something and then totally forget to talk about it.
Totally,
kind of thing. Or, like, only realize afterwards that there was some significant parallel between two things that you've read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We said a while ago, don't read what we're reading, but I would make an addendum to that. Read it after you listen to us talk about it, because then you can't criticize us as you listen to it. Read it a couple weeks later.
Oh, I see. Good. Yeah.
Because then you'll see everything that we missed and everything that we didn't talk about, and figure it out for yourself what you think, and
you won't know we're wrong when you're listening.
At least in real time. We'll be a couple weeks out by then.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have caught up and we'll have worked it out.
Maybe.
We will have realised our ignorance. Maybe we'll never realise our ignorance. We haven't told the listeners about our excellent news.
Oh my God, the news. Oh my God. So we said we're a current events pod. We said we wouldn't talk about beans anymore, but folks, I'd given up on the beans, the allotment broad beans. We got some. I think I planted, I want to say, like 15. I planned a lot.
I was a bit worried you sent me a picture and it was the same.
Yeah, I realized I sent you the same photo.
I
didn't need to do that.
I thought you were so pleased with this one. There was only one.
It's just the exact same angle.
Okay. Because I after Jack sent me this picture of his one bean, his one lone bean growing, I went out to check our broad bean patch and realized that we had quite a lot growing
really?
as well.
Excellent. The weather has changed a bit, I guess.
I suppose that. I mean, you planted yours before us, but ours has been under quite a substantive pane of glass for quite a long time.
Yes.
So I think maybe ours look about the same size as your one did.
Okay, yeah.
And I think maybe we have maybe 10 or so far.
Cool. I think that's, like I was going to say, I think, planned about 15, and I think 10 or 12 have come up or something. But plenty of beans come February or whatever.
So you might have to endure even more sort of tedious week by week
Bean
updates and analysis.
You thought you were out,
Yeah.
but we pulled you back in with the beans.
So yeah, if you're so motivated, you might have to come and sabotage our beam crop.
Yeah, I'd like to see
Then
you
we
try.
can find something equally sort of tedious and
I'd
boring
like
to
to
talk
see
about.
you try. I've been studying Viet Cong war tactics. You're not getting anywhere near my beans. You think you will.
The allotment is well booby-trapped.
Exactly. If you've ever
Spike
seen
bits and-
Family, what is it?
Jack's taken to living in a pit that he's dug
Exactly.
in the allotment.
I live in filth. If you've ever seen, I think it's Swiss Family Robinson, there's a scene
Yes.
where like they capture people.
I
by
so
putting
want to live
palm
in that
fronds.
tree. I want that tree house.
Yes, that would be good. But they put palm fronds over a pit, and in the pit there's like a tiger. I've done that. So don't go anywhere near my beans. You'll get eaten by a tiger.
Yeah. My beans not as well protected.
Yeah, get Dan's beans. I might even get Dan's beans. I've heard that harvesting them is a little tricky, just because you think that it's the right time to harvest, and it was like, oh, it was a week ago. Now they're too leathery.
Oh,
my
I
beans.
see. Okay, yeah. I mean, that was the entire story of our last year of trying to grow things. Is like
Yeah,
harvesting everything too late because we
Yeah.
don't really know,
yeah,
and not really having harvest, but just taking things when we want to eat them.
yeah,
Whereas I'm gonna have to work on harvesting and storing things
yeah.
if we want to grow any substantive crops of anything.
Grow more beets.
Grow more beets. Yeah.
Plenty of beets, folks. Please steal Dan's beets. He's got a lot. Well, all good things must come to an end, and it was a lovely first 10 episodes. I think we did
Yeah.
quite acceptably, and happy with them. I am. Quite good. Yeah, happy we did, I think. Happy with the kind of like selection of things that we've read. Hopefully you guys are too, and hopefully we'll find some more interesting stuff to read, and it'll all be great. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. This is coming out on Christmas, I think, and it's all good. And there's one other thing I want to say, but I forget what it was. Oh, we're not going to take a week off.
Why
We
not?
will just
We
be
should hopefully
going through it.
We should hopefully be able to come back at you with a
Hopefully.
New Year's episode as well.
In theory, yeah.
Yeah.
Will that be on New Year's? The episode after
Maybe
this will
New
come
Year's
out
Eve.
on.
So maybe- is that
No,
New
because I
Year's
think
Day?
I'm working
Yeah.
New Year's Eve, so I think it's gonna. That's the 31st. I think that's a Thursday. So it'll be New Year's Day.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that. We planned it. We planned all this years ago.
Doing great.
Done great. Anything else?
I don't think so. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Yeah. Ho
So-
ho 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 ho. Maybe we'll do a Christmas themed outro. Ho 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 ho.
Not sung by us,
Not sung by us,
fortunately.
unfortunately. We'll get there. We'll review some sheet music, some Marxist sheet music one day, and we'll get there. All right. This charade has gone on long enough. This has been
Auxiliary statement.
Auxiliary Statements.
I am not Jack.
I am not Dan. Figure it out. One of us is lying. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
See you in the new year. The music you heard this episode was Music to Kill Bad People To by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. If you like this song, you can check it out and much, much more on their Bandcamp at kinggizzard.bandcamp.com. Be sure and follow us up on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you like what you heard, be sure and tune in next week for some more commie discussion. Till next time.